What's up, everyone? Good morning and welcome to Shaw Locals Bears Insider Podcast. I am Kyle Nabors along with Sean Hammond here on Friday, February 10th. And Sean, my wife and I, last Sunday were running some errands in the afternoon, and it was one of those times where you had the realization that it was the first Sunday in many months that we weren't watching football. Um, we get one
And you
final
said
game
this
on.
feels weird, right?
Yeah, no, like it was like, well, what do we do with our time now? Like, we were, I guess I shouldn't complain. It was kind of nice to have a Sunday to yourself, but like you get so used to having that thing to kind of base your weekend around it. It's weird when it's taken away from you.
Yeah, it is weird. It certainly is weird. We get so used to this over all these months, and instead you're making a run to the grocery store or some other such chore on your Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. And as much as I'm looking forward to Sunday, the Super Bowl is always a fun spectacle. It's certainly not the same as your standard, NFL Sunday. Um, the pageantry's fun and all the commercials are fun, everything that goes in it, but it's definitely a different feel than your typical NFL game.
I think a lot of NFL fans would much rather take a regular season Sunday when you can sit down and watch the red zone for you know,
Oh,
however many
dude.
hours, and you got
I miss I miss Red Zone.
so many chances for a good game. Whereas if the Super Bowl's a dud, it kind of sucks.
Yeah. We've been spoiled the last,
There's been some close ones lately.
yeah,
Well,
we
that
did have the bad
Chiefs
game
Bucks
between
was kind of boring.
Kansas City, Tampa 2 years ago was a bad game.
Yeah,
But outside of that, we've had pretty good luck with Super Bowls lately. Um, but yeah, you dude, like not having red zone, like it's so tough. I don't um I was pretty excited. We switched to YouTube TV recently,
mm.
and the I don't know if you saw that, but NFL the Red Zone channel is moving to YouTube TV off of Direct TV. So that was a nice little find there because I would be lost without Red Zone channel. It's really nice. I usually have two TVs going. Like during the season, I'll have the Bears on one TV, and then that with the sound on, and then have Red Zone channel on a second TV. That's the benefit of not going to Soldier Field like I used to. You're down there. Obviously, it's hard to keep track of what else is going on around the NFL on Sundays when you're at Soldier Field or on the road like you are. Obviously as a
Yeah,
Bears
yeah, it
person.
is. But you know what? That's how you have to do it. You have to fully commit your attention to that Bears game. To do a job like this. And certainly, I wish I could watch more of what's going on around the league on Sundays, but unfortunately, there's just a lot of it that I don't get to because especially this year, the Bears had so many of those noon Sunday kickoffs that you kind of miss what's going on around the league.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. I really like the noon Sunday kickoffs for our purposes in
I do
terms of
too. Yeah.
getting our content online and not being up against a deadline. It's wonderful. It makes our jobs a lot easier, but at the same time, like I love being able to on like a Sunday noon be able to focus on Red Zone channel and be like, all right, the Bears are either playing tonight or at 3 o'clock. It's great to be able to do that. But Rick Gonzalez chiming in this morning or asking, you guys going to watch the USFL or XFL? I tell you what, I've seen bits and pieces over the last few years when they've been going on. Like I don't hate it. Like I don't sit there and grumble, but like I'm also not the type of person that's going to like plan a day around.
It's not appointment viewing for
Yeah.
for us. I'm in the same boat, Kyle. I mean, there's other things I'd rather be spending my time doing. Certainly, if I'm just sitting around and I'm looking for something to watch, I'll tune in and watch a game for a little bit. But yeah, I'm not planning my schedule around that.
It was I was down in St. Pete a couple of years ago for a work conference, and it was about this time of year. It was after the Super Bowl, and the XFL had started, and I ended up at they have a Hofbräu House. I think it might have closed during the pandemic. Hofbräu House. anyone who's a beer fan, particularly of like German beer down in Munich, is incredible. There was a few locations, including one in Rosemont, a Hofbrau house that closed during the pandemic. But anyway, so I get down to this conference and I wander over. I'm like, find out that there's a Hofbrau house in St. Pete. I'm like, well, I got to go get a beer now, right? So I wander over to this place and there's an XFL game involving the Tampa Bay team. I can't remember what the mascot is for Tampa Bay, or if it's still even if that team still even exists. But anyway, so I'm sitting at the bar at Hofbrau House, and the Tampa Bay XFL team scores a touchdown, and like 7 or 8 people started like going nuts, and it was like one of those things I had to check which TV they were actually rooting for, because I just didn't expect people to get excited for an XFL touchdown.
Yeah, I love that. I love when people in your city get behind those sort of random sports like that. And you know what? I don't think somebody's asking in the chat, does the Chicago have a USFL or XFL? I don't believe so, Kyle.
I don't think so.
I don't think they have one in either. They did in the original XFL.
Yeah, they had one in the original XFL. I think back to, I'm wondering, anyone in chat, we'll see here. Did anyone ever go see, wasn't there an Arena League team that played in like Rosemont or somewhere?
Oh, the Rush. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the Chicago Rush.
Oh, yeah, the Arena League's coming back too.
Yeah, it is coming back, isn't it?
They just announced that a week or two ago.
Yeah, the Chicago Rush.
They won it one year. I vaguely remember that.
They did win it one year. I never went to see a Chicago Rush game. Anyone in the chat go see a Chicago Rush game? Was it fun? I feel like I watched it maybe once, but can't say that it was something I paid much attention to.
I never went to a Rush game, but when I was an intern out in Arizona, I did cover an Arena League game, whatever the Arizona Rattlers, I think they were called.
Okay.
I covered one of their games randomly.
This is not where I intended for.
I didn't expect to be talking about that.
No, but this is this is a great part of doing this live and having people in and kind of steering the show. And why the hell not? It's February. We don't have a ton of Bears to talk about, but so we are going to dive into. Last week we spent a bit more time talking about offense, kind of going back through the 2022 season. This week, want to go through and talk about the defensive side a little bit more. Don't mind if you guys have questions, of course. Throw whatever questions or comments you want into the chat. But overall, do plan on spending more time on the defense than the offense this week. And Sean, actually, before I get into that, I do want to make sure, of course, to get the propers out of the way. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Kyle Nabors, at Sean_Hammond. Of course, go to shawlocal.com. And you'll find all of our Bears content there. Sean's been working hard on his season postseason review series during the postseason. But the 2022 review series, we're finishing that up. Special teams goes up tomorrow morning. Safeties went up this morning. And Sean, as I said, we mentioned it a little bit last week. I feel a lot more confident on where the Bears are on the defensive side of the ball, or at least maybe, like, obviously the defense needs a ton of work. But I feel like there's a much clearer path in terms of the draft and free agency to getting to where this team needs to be than on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the offensive side is you saw some bright spots and some flashes, but really you can build that thing however the heck you want to build it. Whatever they want to be on offense, they can do. Whereas the defense, I think, has a very clear assignment under Matt Eberflus's 4-3 scheme, and they also have, based on what we saw last year, you very clearly know what you need. They seem to be in pretty good shape in that secondary when healthy, when everybody's there and they're healthy. They seem like they have a pretty good unit. You found a nice rookie in Jack Sanborn, but you probably need more help at that linebacker spot, and really a lot of focus has to be on the defensive line and the front up there. Clearly, they weren't creating enough pressure or the type of pressure that they need to be successful in this scheme. And so that's going to be a big focus, whether you're talking defensive ends, defensive tackles. I think they're really going to have to search hard for both.
Yeah. I mean, the defensive line overall needs a lot of work. Kind of work our way through it here, starting as you said in the secondary, because Rick had a question. I'll start with that. Rick says Jalen contract get done this year or no? Sean, do you have any lean one way or the other there?
I would lean towards yes. I feel like they're going to extend him, and I think they want to get that done. You know, he's not a leader in terms of like an Eddie Jackson leader or like a vocal guy, but he's definitely well respected in that room and in the locker room. And I do think they're going to get one done. Now, I do have some questions or some curiosity surrounding Ryan Poles, and you know we haven't really seen him extend anyone, and so what's the timeline going to look like? You know, we know Ryan Pace like to get those done a lot of times in August or early September, right before the season started. How much of a priority is that going to be for Ryan Poles, or is this going to be a thing that drags on into the season? I don't really know, but I do think they're going to get one done.
Yeah, I think so as well. You are right. I don't know what the timeline looks like here. To me, I think that would be a priority.
I do too.
Jalen Johnson has played well. Your secondary is looking like a real strength of this team. If you can keep that unit intact for the next 3 or 4 years, I think you look for ways to do that. You got the money. I don't expect Jalen Johnson to want absurd money. I don't think he's played to that level. And I mean, you spend your time around the locker room, obviously. Like there's also there's no signs where to me where it's like he's the type of kid that's worried about breaking the bank. Like obviously he wants fair market value, but I also don't think he's looking to reset market value, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I don't. I guess I can't say. I don't know what he wants exactly, but I mean, if if you're anybody on this Bears team, and if you're Jalen Johnson, if you're Cole Kmet, I think you can look at the amount of available cap space on this roster, and you can go to management and say, "Hey, I need a new deal, and you have all this space. Why not make me the highest paid cornerback?" Now, I don't know if that's gonna happen per se, but he's going to certainly be in the conversation near the top of the cornerback market. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be the guy who sets the market, because you're right. I mean, he's a very very good player. He does his job. He when he's healthy, he's very reliable. Now the problem is that teams have in the past have been able to sort of avoid throwing near him, and so you don't see the types of turnovers and game changing plays that maybe you want in your highest paid cornerback in the NFL.
I'm trying to go through and get some comps in my head for Jalen. Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be probably paid in like that top 5 to top 8 range. I do think he's worthy of that. He's played really well. CJ had an interesting question. CJ Williams checking in. Thanks, CJ, for the question. When you evaluate Jalen Johnson, do you penalize him for the lack of interceptions? Sean, I don't,
I
because
don't either. Go ahead.
yeah, it's you saw it particularly last year. Teams are avoiding Jalen Johnson. He's to that level that, particularly with Kyler Gordon unestablished on the other side this year, you really saw teams avoid Jalen Johnson as much as possible, really.
The only time he was consistently targeted throughout the game was against the Eagles when they had AJ Brown. And obviously you're going to target AJ Brown and you're going to take your chances in that matchup. And sure, he wound up with a lot of yards, had a couple of big plays. But Johnson, knocked down a couple of passes in that game too. I don't penalize him for the lack of interceptions because of that. And you saw, especially his rookie year, you saw how much, how talented he was at batting that ball away. And sure, you want to turn some of those into interceptions, but he can keep the ball out of guys' hands. And really, that's the number one job. That's what you're paying a cornerback to do. And yes, the turnovers, that's what everybody sees in the stat book. When the guys who, when the all pro team comes out, it's usually the guys who have a lot of turnovers, a lot of takeaways and interceptions. But, I think you have to look a little bit deeper at that cornerback spot.
I would say that one of the things that is concerning or I shouldn't say concerning, with Jalen Johnson that you're looking at is, I guess what I would say is the lack of interceptions. I don't think you can put that on Jalen Johnson. I think those interceptions will come with a better pass rush. Like Jalen Johnson, we talk about the fact that the Bears secondary performed really well despite the lack of pass rush. Turnovers are generated by that pass rush. Like those guys have been great in coverage, but without being able to get to the quarterback and force those types of errant throws, like there's not a ton of opportunity for Jalen Johnson, particularly when teams are avoiding him. And I think Sam in the chat here was talking about he held his own early in the game against the Eagles. I agree. I thought he played pretty well early on against AJ Brown there. That was a game that just kind of fell apart against the Bears, or, as that thing went, as that game progressed, things just kind of went off the rail.
Yeah, I think that's a great example where you have to rewatch the tape rather than look at the box score, because AJ Brown finished with 180 something receiving yards in that game. But if you actually watch that battle that was going on between them, particularly in that first half, yeah, Jalen Johnson held his own in that game, and that's really promising because we've seen that was one of the struggles that he kind of dealt with his second year is in those big games against those big matchups. He was struggling a little bit against Devontae Adams and other guys. But I think if you look beyond the stat line, Jalen played really well in that game, and yeah, I mean, you got to fix the whole if you fix this defensive line and get a pass rush going in there, things are going to fall differently. Certainly that's going to create more turnovers in general and more opportunities for that secondary. And yeah, Kyle, I mean, those guys had to defend for really long times on some of these plays where that 4-man rush wasn't getting anything.
So I want to work our way up from the secondary to the defensive line. Because as we were saying earlier, it pretty clearly falls in those steps, right? In terms of what needs to be fixed. Secondary looking to be in good shape. Really quickly, going to pop this up here from good old Lori Ryan checking in. My son could do much better job talking. And all I'll say to that is, Lori, be a happier human being. Like, come on, man. Like, that is, why would you pop into a chat just to talk about? Yes, I sometimes.
Thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for joining the show. I don't know what really tell you there. You don't have to watch. Like, anyway, so looking through the linebacker position, and there are some interesting names. We had a question in the chat earlier asking about how deep free agency is at the linebacking position, Sean. And there's not a lot of big names out there. You got a couple guys that are really interesting, like Levante David is probably going to get a good amount of money here, but there's not a lot of guys that I expect the break to break the bank here. But I do think there are a lot of guys that fit nicely for the Bears at the linebacker position in free agency.
Yeah, there potentially could be, and it comes down to kind of what they want to do. Do they want to spend big for a guy like that, like a Levante David, like a David Long, like a TJ Edwards, are some of those names at the top of the list. Tremaine Edmonds from the Bills, Jermaine Pratt from the Bengals. What do they really want to do here is what it comes down to, because you got Jack Sanborn, who's a nice piece, and certainly you want to keep seeing what's going on there. Nick Morrow is a free agent. What do you want to do there? He could be a guy you bring back on another cheap 1-year deal if that's what you want to do, if you're not really feeling like you're ready to spend at that position. Or he could be a guy that you let walk and replace with one of those higher end free agents. I don't necessarily know what Ryan Poles is thinking in that area. Kyle, what do you think the Bears should do at this linebacker spot?
So let's start with Jack Sanborn, because that's the first key here. Do Do you want him at middle linebacker? Do you see him more as an off-ball linebacker? He played well, filling in for or taking over once the Roquan Smith trade happened. I kind of think you let him play at middle linebacker. And one thing I wanted to bring up here, and you already mentioned TJ Edwards. We talked about a pre-show. I was looking through. I found it really interesting. TJ Edwards is another kid from the northern suburbs, much like Jack Sanborn out of Lake Zurich. Went to Wisconsin like Jack Sanborn.
Yep.
Was a undrafted, went undrafted out of Wisconsin, and now is a all-pro linebacker, playing for a Super Bowl. Started all 17 games for the Eagles during the regular season. Is heading himself into free agency here. It's just kind of crazy the comp there. They're also very similar in size.
Edwards has. They're about the same height. Edwards has maybe like 10 pounds on him.
I don't know. I'm not trying to say that Jack Sanborn is going to turn into the level of player TJ Edwards is, or has turned into. But you look at Wisconsin linebackers to begin with, and the way that they've performed over the years in the NFL, and you see another guy like TJ Edwards really follow that footprint or that blueprint, and it gives you another reason to feel good about Jack Sanborn moving forward.
That should be exactly what you want for Jack Sanborn. That would be, the best case scenario. Is he turns into a stud like that, a guy who's going to start for you the next couple of years and put his name in the conversation for the Pro Bowl and All Pro stuff. We saw some promising plays from Jack this season. I think he. I think he's a little bit faster on that film than maybe you would expect, just because he has those really good instincts and that nose for the ball. And you never see him fall for a fake or a juke or anything like that. And he's got a really good understanding of what his job is and going and getting the ball carrier. And that's certainly something you can build on with him. I think another off season. If he keeps working in that weight room and keeps, studying the game, I think there's no reason why he shouldn't be starting for you next season, regardless of whether you bring somebody else in as a big time free agent. I think he's earned that right.
Yeah, he's going to get another shot. Sam checking in. Sanborn is the only one of the three linebackers I would keep, but I wouldn't commit him to a spot yet because he's not very athletic. And next year, teams will be game planning for him. I actually think he's more athletic than you realize, Sam. Like I think maybe the biggest knock on him. So maybe he's. I guess I'm going to backtrack here. He makes up for the athleticism or the top-notch NFL athleticism, not having that, with how incredibly instinctual he is.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Sean? I think that's the best way to put it.
That's absolutely the way to put it. And I guess if you're an opponent, I think the best way to counteract that would be to try to put him in uncomfortable spots or unusual spots where he has to make decisions that maybe he's not used to. And sure, maybe teams will game plan for that a little bit more with a full season of film and a full off season to plan for that. But yeah, I do think that he plays faster than you expect because of that.
CJ Williams with Eagles didn't value off-ball linebackers. Yeah, they have not invested a lot at that position. And it kind of makes me wonder if the Bears are going to take a similar tack there, actually, Sean. One, obviously, the Bears decided to pull the trigger during the season and move on from Roquan Smith, who then did get himself a nice deal with the Baltimore Ravens. But you look at it, and I wonder how heavily the Bears plan on investing in that off-ball position. And so, like TJ Edwards, he's the type of player that I think actually would be probably a pretty good fit for the Bears. But he's put himself in a position where he's probably going to get, 4 years, 45, 50, maybe even 55 to $60 million here. I don't know if the Bears are willing to spend that type of money.
Yeah, I don't know if they're willing to spend that type of money at this position. And given everything that just went down with Roquan, it would be a little surprising to see them do that. I know you're not talking about paying a guy $20 million like you had to pay Roquan $20 million a year, but still, 15 million, that's a big chunk of your salary cap. Is that where you want to commit it to that off-ball linebacker spot? I do, I can see them certainly spending money. I think that's going to be much more likely to come along that defensive line, those edge rusher spots, that defensive tackle spot. But I do think that they kind of need to approach this linebacker position as with those defensive line spots, in terms of just getting as many talented guys as they can and seeing who sticks. I wouldn't be surprised if they spend a little money at linebacker and use a draft pick at that spot, because you don't know what's going to work and what's not. So why not give yourself multiple shots?
Want to give a shout out to the sponsor of Shaw Locals Bears Insider Podcast, Marengo Guns. Always buying, always paying top dollar for your guns, ammo, and military item. Come see the experts at Marengo Guns. Open 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. 7 days a week. And Sean, you bring up there where I really wanted to go, and really the thrust of this is the defensive line. And I wanted to go from the back to the start, because, or from the back end of the defense to the start, or the front of the defense, because when you look at both free agency and the draft, defensive line is where you find a lot of the top tier talent. And we're going to get to free agency, obviously, before we get to the draft. Just when you look at the top few names out there, you got a guy like Javon Hargrave coming from the Philadelphia Eagles. You got a guy, trying to find my list here, Daron Payne out of Washington.
Yep.
Those are two guys that are going to get a lot of money this offseason. They're two guys that deserve to get paid this offseason. They're also two positions that the Bears could really, really use upgrades at. But then you look at it, where the Bears are sit. We can pretty safely assume the Bears are trading out at number one. But we just don't know how far they're going down. But you start looking at the draft, you got a guy like Will Anderson who's going to be very near the top of the draft. Jalen Carter, Tyree Wilson. These are guys right there, three guys. Miles Murphy out of Clemson. There are four guys right off the top there that are going to be top 10 picks probably. And when you combine that with the top talent that I'm talking about in free agency, so how do you approach it, right? Like, obviously, do you prioritize that really young impact player? Like, I love Jalen Carter. Like, I think that would be an absolutely fantastic fit for the Bears. But like, do you pass up on a Daron Payne? And if you can get someone like that, where that frees up your ability to then maybe take, that stud wide receiver or that stud left tackle, you're trying to balance these things. Defensive line is going to make or break this Bears offseason.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the number one most important thing that Ryan Poles has to work on this offseason, and I think that's very clear to them, and that's very clear to the general public as well. I don't know that you can game plan for these things, but I don't know that you can necessarily. I think sometimes you have to focus on what's ahead of you, and right now that's free agency. Can you get a guy like Darren Payne? I think if the answer is yes, then you get a guy like that, and then you adjust your draft plan after the fact. It comes down to like, are you going to be able to convince some of these guys, these top free agents, to come play for you? And certainly they have the money to do that. They can buy whoever the heck they want.
That's helpful when you can throw money at the problem. I mean, you don't want to be stupid about it. Don't get me wrong,
yeah.
But when you can, you also don't want to pull a Phil Emery and start bidding against yourself here. But yeah, you can. That carrot is always nice to have.
A good GM has to have that long-term plan for when you're looking at a single offseason, you have to plan for the draft and free agency. Yes, but there might be some surprises along the way. Obviously free agency happens first. So you have to, see who's available and see who's willing to come play for you. I would think, certainly Jalen Carter would be an awesome defensive tackle for the Bears, but if they can go out and sign somebody maybe they pivot and they look towards a Will Anderson or somebody on the edge who can give them a better pass rush there at that edge spot early in the draft. I think you have to be really flexible with how you approach this.
Yeah, that's the nice thing, right? Is with the money and with the hell, I mean, the multiple positions that the Bears need going into this offseason. That is kind of the nice thing, right? Is you don't have to overpay for any particular player because at the end of the day, you do need multiple spots. And on the defensive line in particular, you do have multiple options here. Like last year, their one big kind of splash signing that obviously ended up falling through was Larry Ogunjobi. But I didn't feel that both in the draft and in that free agent class, the defensive line was nearly as deep as it is this year, Sean.
No, sorry, in the draft or free agency, what'd you say?
Oh, really in both
Both.
classes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of available options. Whether you're talking, whether you're talking defensive ends, whether you're talking tackles. I think it's the Bears are lucky that it's sort of worked out this way. That they will have options between Will Anderson and Jalen Carter if they want to take one of those two guys. They're going to have opportunities to really shape this however they want. You look at the defensive end. I would say those two guys you mentioned, Hargrave and Payne at defensive tackle. Those are really two of the top guys available. But you look at the defensive end spot too. You got Marcus Davenport, Yannick Ngakoue, Justin Houston, Jadeveon Clowney. Certainly, they can spend money there too. And I don't think that there's. This is a spot where they can afford to use both cap space and high end draft capital on that defensive end spot, because I don't think that you're really starting from scratch. I know Travis Gibson is was a nice player and seemed to have a pretty good year last year, but kind of didn't really come through this year. And Al-Qadim Muhammad didn't do anything for you at the defensive end spot, and you traded Robert Quinn. They're starting from scratch here is really what they're doing. So I think you got to, it's okay to address that in multiple ways.
Getting a lot of comments in here and really appreciate it. I'm trying to go back up here. Sam Rush had said the Bears have a blueprint to follow from the Eagles. We need to build a rotation of guys on the defensive line. I mean, I don't know if that's a blueprint specifically from the Eagles. Everyone is looking to have a deeper rotation. Sean mentioning guys like Travis Gibson and Al-Qadim Muhammad. I'm not sure. Did you mention Dominique Robinson in there as well?
I don't think I did.
So those are guys.
Yeah, those guys are going to be around.
Those guys are going to be in the rotation. Sam, I pulled this comment up though, actually, because you made me go back thinking of TJ Edwards and that Bears connection. The Bears connection and this blueprint about the Eagles following. It's funny that you say that though, because Ian Cunningham, Bears assistant GM, was up for, I believe, the interview with Arizona and Tennessee. Came over with Ryan Poles, or Ryan Poles brought him over from the Philadelphia Eagles. Had a lot of success there, learning in that front office. So I think there are some concepts that Ian Cunningham, I think it's pretty clear. You can see the Bears incorporating some of those concepts for roster building that Philly has used over the last decade or so.
Yeah, and the comment is right. You want as many guys as possible. It's just hard to do. I mean, when the Eagles are in a very, very good situation where you're trading for a guy like Robert Quinn, and he doesn't have to be your star pass rusher. He can be the guy coming off the bench. So yeah, that's taken them some time to get to that point, to build that. I mean, it's not like they assembled that just in the last year or two. That's going to take. You got to throw a lot of darts at the board before you start finding, 5, 6, 7 really good defensive linemen up there.
Auger checking in. No edge. Listened to Urlacher on CHGO yesterday. Sorry. No, dude. Adam Hogue and those guys do great work. Obviously want you over here checking out our content and watching our show, but Also, make sure you're doing that as well. It says, Urlacher mentioned it all starts with the three technique. Auger, I agree. Like if all things are equal, right? I'd like the Bears their number one priority to be that three technique position. That doesn't always work out that way though. When teams start getting into bidding wars, but then that's what I'm saying though. Like there's enough flexibility in this free agent class, in this draft class on the defensive line, whether the Bears decide to target that free technique or out on the edge, there are enough names and enough quality talent and the Bears need enough of it that they have the flexibility. You should feel good, I think, about where the Bears stand going into the offseason with where the talent lies.
Yeah, I mean, look at what happened last offseason with the Larry Ogunjobi thing. I mean, I think that is a sign that Ryan Poles knows how important that position is. That was the thing that they were targeting, and it's unfortunate the way that particular deal worked out and fell through, and the physical wasn't there, and they weren't able to get their number one guy at that spot, and that sucked. But I think that just kind of shows that they're prioritizing that spot, and I think they're going to prioritize that spot this offseason. You got another chance at it. There's a couple of really good-looking defensive tackles in free agency. I wouldn't be surprised if they do spend a lot of money at that spot.
I think it's the most likely spot that they drop big money in free agency because you look at both offensive tackle and wide receiver in the free agent class. More so wide receiver. There are some offensive tackles that I, at least have interest in, like Orlando Brown Jr., but like I don't know if Orlando Brown Jr. is a guy that I want to give a ton of money to. I don't have those question marks about the two guys. Particularly, I really like Payne. Like, if Washington may end up putting the franchise tag on him, and if that's the case, that changes this calculus. But if he makes it to free agency, I think that should absolutely be the number one target for the Bears.
Yeah, I wrote that in I got my free agent spreadsheet up here. That's one of my notes. Is he is definitely a franchise tag candidate. I could see the Commanders doing that. If he does get to the market, I mean, you're talking about a lot of money too. I mean, that's probably going to be I don't even know, a 5-year, $100 million type deal. Something in that range. But yeah, he's certainly him and Hargrave are the two best options, I would say, at that spot.
Triple R checking in, saying Orlando Brown Jr. isn't athletic enough. Yeah, and that's why I'm saying I'd rather the Bears focus their money on free agency at like someone like Payne, because I feel like there's fewer unknowns with Payne than a guy like Orlando Brown. I think Orlando Brown is solid. Like particularly the second half of the season, he had a kind of a slow start for Kansas City this year, but like I just don't know if the upside is there. I have questioned the mark. I don't have those about some of the guys on the defensive line. Want to go back up to Triple R. He had said Gibson and Al-Qadim Muhammad can go, but he had also followed it up pretty quickly after that, Sean, with our depth backups also need to be upgraded. And so like Triple R, I understand like Gibson and Al-Qadim Muhammad were disappointing this year, but like you got to have bodies around. Like you can't turn over the entire roster here, even with all this cap space. You're gonna have to have some names back on value contracts, and both of those guys are at money that it makes all the sense in the world to bring them back. They obviously have to upgrade those positions, but those guys are both going to be here.
Yeah, look, I mean, I feel like Travis Gibson could be a solid rotational guy, a solid backup, a guy who comes in for some snaps here and there. He showed that he could do that on a defensive line when Robert Quinn was in there, and he had some help. He didn't have to do it all like he did this past season. You got to have bodies. Yes, they need to upgrade some of those. Some of those backup spots and rotational guys need to be upgraded as well. But you're right, Kyle. I mean, they can't change everyone in one off season.
Yeah, I multiple people checking in on no. Like, I understand. Like, he didn't play well, where there was yeah, Sam Rush has to go for the cap space. Like they don't need the cap space though. Like that's the thing. Like if you cut him, you're just looking for another body like him. You know, like if they were up against it and they could find a cheaper person to fill it in or fill that roster spot in, then yeah, go ahead and cut him. But you're going to be doing the same thing for a rotational player, which is what you want Al-Qadim Muhammad to be ideally. Again, if they needed the money, absolutely. I just don't see a reason to do it.
I mean, yeah, he's only got one more year on his deal. Sure, you could cut him and save. It looks like you could save just under $4 million. But why do you need? You have so much salary cap space. I don't think that that's necessarily. You don't need to. Why not just keep him around? And sure, maybe you know what? Maybe they cut him after training camp or something like that. But I'm with you guys in that. Obviously, he didn't do anything last season. So that's not promising. But I could see him sticking around at least through the offseason.
Yeah, he's a guy that could be cut come August, right? When you go down the 53 man, there's just no reason to cut him right now, unless for some insane reason you need the money. But there's just no chance in hell the Bears are going to get to that point this offseason where they need that type of money. There's no reason not to let him go through this offseason and try and play his way into a roster spot.
And that's kind of why I don't. This is one of those. It's been weird because the last few years, especially under Ryan Pace, it seemed like we get to the end of the season and every year we're like, okay, who can they cut to save some space so that they can, possibly sign somebody? And they're in a very advantageous salary cap spot right now where I don't think that they necessarily need to cut anybody for those reasons because you have so much salary cap space next year.
Yeah, and that's what Sam following up with. We could reallocate the funds to sign a better player at that position. You can do that without cutting Al-Qadim Muhammad, though. That's what I'm saying. Like they have the cap space, they have the roster spaces. You can sign someone.
You can sign two $20 million a year defensive ends and still have $50 million in cap space.
Yeah, and then Al-Qadim Muhammad can play his way throughout this offseason and through training camp and see if he can earn his way into a roster spot. And if not, then he'll be cut. Like there's just, sorry, guys, I try and I don't want to just, I understand why people are really down on him. And as you said, like he didn't do anything last year. It's just, there's no reason to cut bait like on a sunk cost when you don't have to. Like if he, what if, you look at how across the board, the defensive line was terrible last year, right? If you get better talent overall, where he's a rotational piece, is there a possibility that he plays better as a rotational piece? Yeah, I think so. So why not take that tact when you have the flexibility to do so?
Yeah, that's a great point, Kyle. I mean, if the defense as a whole is playing better, if you have a better defensive end on the other side, rushing the quarterback with him, that opens things up for guys. That gives you better opportunities. If the offensive line has to focus on what's happening on the other side, it has to put two guys on say your new star defensive end. That's going to give guys like him, like Al-Qadim Muhammad, like Travis Gibson, like Dominique Robinson, more one-on-one opportunities and better chances to get to the quarterback.
Where was it? Rick chimed 55. Al-Qadim Muhammad was one of the first free agents we ever signed. I mean, I guess I get that.
Depends how you're measuring it, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a throwaway season.
I think of like the first free agent class for Ryan Pace. I almost said Ryan Poles there. Ryan Pace and that kind of being a throwaway class as well. I thought there were some worse signings in that class than anything in this past class for Ryan Poles. But again, he did nothing. I completely understand. He did nothing. It was really bad. There's just not a reason to cut him. Outside of the fact that he played poorly, I get it. But here's an example. And I understand that Robert Quinn was always a much better player than Al-Qadim Muhammad. So don't tell me I'm expecting Al-Qadim Muhammad to go out and set a franchise record. But like, people were absolutely furious with Robert Quinn after his first year in Chicago, and then he went out the next year and set the franchise record for sacks in a single season. Again, I'm not saying Al-Qadim Muhammad is going to get anywhere close to that. I think there's probably a pretty decent chance that if they do keep him, like I'm saying they should, that he does end up getting cut at the end of August. What I'm saying, though, is there's just no reason to cut him now. And maybe you get lucky and he does rebound. And, there was a reason that they gave him a 2-year contract. They gave a lot of 1-year deals to a lot of guys. They were comfortable enough to give him a little bit more wiggle room for a reason.
Yeah, he's one of the few guys. Him, Lucas Patrick. You know what? I think that should be the plan, Kyle. I mean, you're going to have 90 guys when you open training camp or whatever. There's no reason why he couldn't be one of those guys. And yeah, sure, if he looks the same and nothing's changed, cut him at the end of August and move on. I think it's as simple as that.
Mr. Shorty, did 55 even have 1 sack? I think not.
I don't think he did. Maybe
I don't. Yeah, maybe half. But again, Jaquan Brisker led the team in sacks at 4. There was no one. Dominique Robinson.
He had 1 sack.
Yeah, I mean, Dominique Robinson and Travis Gibson, they had the quick start to the season. No one performed well on the defensive line. No one. So, like, you're not bringing in 8 to 10 new bodies on the defensive line. It's just not happening. They're going to bring in probably 4 to 5 new bodies, but like, some of that depth needs to be there. Like, so yeah.
one sack, 1 TFL, 3 quarterback hits.
I did not expect Al-Qadim Muhammad to. I did not expect Al-Qadim Muhammad to be such a lightning. Again, like, he was really bad. I'm not trying to say that he wasn't. I just didn't expect him to be.
I'm with you guys. Like, he was bad. Yes. I'm with you.
Rick, can I get some of your weed, Kyle? No, you can't have any of my weed. Weed's expensive in Illinois. You're not getting any weed from. I don't know. There was just a new dispensary opened up in Crystal Lake, Sean.
I was reading about that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a sensory dispensary, and I probably shouldn't give a hard time to any future people that could do some advertising with us, but I went in there to check it out the other day with my wife and was looking at the sign for like all the taxes and stuff on it, and was laughing at the incredible amount of stuff, or the amount of taxes that you pay on the markup.
Oh yeah, it's bonkers.
Completely getting off topic here, but
we're going into weird places.
Yeah, going into weird. Whatever. It's
Kyle,
Friday.
Do you know my brother works at a dispensary?
I did not know.
Yeah, he's got the connections. Maybe he can get us a new advertiser.
Dude, I would I bet working at a dispensary is a very entertaining job.
He likes dealing with the people. I'll tell you that.
I bet he has some good stories to tell. But anyway, we are completely off base here. Not where I expected. There's not. There's no hub here. Get weird. Yeah. See, now we need. I need Hub's opinion on dispensaries and
I would
marijuana.
love to ask Hub about that. I don't know where
and the tax base for legalized weed in Illinois. Anyway, so yeah, we're about 50 minutes here. Let's spend a few minutes here at the end. Let's spend a few minutes talking about the Super Bowl, because this is a game that, while as I was saying, it's not my favorite game because of. It just takes too long sometimes, and it's a little bit distracting. On the bright side, I really, really, really love this matchup. Like, all year long, I thought that this was the best possible matchup. I like this Philadelphia team, the way it was coming together. These are two teams that really were playing well down the stretch. I don't know how to pick this one, Sean.
I've been on the fence a lot. And my initial gut, like that Monday morning after the AFC and NFC championship games, I was thinking the Eagles, and I'm going to stick with that. I do think the Eagles are going to win. I think they have the talent up front. They can give Patrick Mahomes a hard time with that defensive line, and obviously the Eagles' offensive line is really, really good, and they can just run right through just about anybody. They're the most efficient running team in the NFL, but it's a really good matchup, Kyle. You're right. It's so tough to pick this game. Obviously, it's hard to go against Mahomes because he does some wizardry out there on the field, and he's been really, really good this year. That Chiefs offense has been really efficient. If you look at the metrics, they've been by far the most efficient offense in the NFL, and this is a great matchup for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how Andy Reid and Matt Nagy, by the way, getting a lot of play in media, Chicago media this week down there at the Super Bowl. Interested to see what wrinkles that Andy Reid and Matt Nagy and they come up with for this Philadelphia Eagles defense, because the Eagles are playing really well defensively. The question that I have is, if Philly's able to build a couple touchdown lead in this game, let's say they were able to get up 10 to 14 points, I wonder if Kansas City, it's weird to say this, like I don't feel like this is as explosive of an offense as we've seen with, Tyreek Hill obviously gone this offseason. They're a bit more, I mean, they can still get chunks, but you know what I mean? They're a bit more possession based.
They've embraced the intermediate and short throws a lot more this year than they were previously.
Sorry, I got this something that just popped in. Must say, I'll kind of enjoy watching the Eagles beat Reid. I kind of why do you say that, Jill? I love Andy Reid actually. Like, one, I enjoy the man's personality, but I love the fact that he was kind of thought of as someone who choked in big games with the Eagles. And you see so often in the NFL, like the guys that stick around for a long time, these head coaches, they do an incredible job of adapting to the changes in the game on the field. Like Andy Reid, I think the reason I love Andy Reid is he's done a very good job of evolving as a head coach. The way their schemes have moved, Sean, over the last decade or so, he is always at the cutting edge of what they do in the NFL and incorporating new college schemes. And when you combine that with who Andy Reid as a person, and I don't know if everyone here like Andy Reid, in his personal life has gone through some stuff and has overcome some adversity. You combine everything together, and I consistently finding myself rooting for Andy Reid.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly has evolved, Kyle. You're absolutely right. I mean, there's no better example than this season. They have an entire new receiving core practically, and the fact that they're sitting here in the Super Bowl, given that they have an entirely different receiving group with Patrick Mahomes, I mean, that's really impressive. I don't think a lot of teams could do that, and that just speaks to Andy Reid and obviously to Patrick Mahomes and what those two guys are able to do together. And I've always kind of liked Andy Reid. I don't have a particular, I'm not rooting for either one of these teams in this game. Because I think there's a lot of good storylines on both sides, but it's been really impressive to watch what Andy Reid has done with that Chiefs organization, and I think we're a little bit spoiled by how what is it, 5 straight AFC Championship games? That's so hard to do.
Sam saying Andy Reid, the QB whisperer, is a gem in the league. What he has done with quarterbacks is nothing short of amazing. You look at what they were able to get out of Alex Smith before Patrick Mahomes took over. They certainly maximize that. And the other thing with Andy Reid, how many times have we talked about or dreaded watching the Bears run any type of screen outside of you remember that the first season with Matt Nagy and with Trey Burton, they actually had some success running some of the inside stuff with the tight end and tight end screens, and then it absolutely fell apart. Andy Reid is incredible at finding ways to utilize those quick hit screen passes or inside shovel passes. When you combine that with the different names they've used at running back. Like you go from Kareem Hunt, who gets himself into trouble, right? Ends up out of there. They draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first round, hasn't exactly lived up. Jerick McKinnon. Like they've cycled through so many different names at running back, but they've all been productive. Like the way they run their offense, the system is just working, and he's evolving to stay at the forefront and keeping them ahead. And it's really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, he is a perfect example of just a really quality all around coach. I mean, and remember too, a few years back when he gave up the play calling and said, he handed it off to Nagy? Isn't that the story? I'm going back a few years now. When they had Alex Smith, they had a really good start and then lost a couple of games, and Andy Reid said he was going to hand the play calling off to Nagy, I believe it was.
Yeah,
that was a year right before Nagy got hired, I think.
I believe so. That was part of the
just little things like that.
Yeah, no, and I'd like to go back and maybe find out a bit more of that story, right? Because obviously Andy Reid is a terrific coach and a good play caller, but you're right. The fact that he was able to recognize, it's kind of like, you get a case of like the yips. If anyone listening is like a golfer, like you get into your head, and he was able to hand it off there, but not everyone is able. I mean, Matt Nagy wasn't able to do that, right?
He
How many
struggled
times?
so much with giving up that power.
Yeah, it's really cool to see how Andy Reid has evolved from his days with the Eagles, and I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to the halftime show too, right? Rihanna, gonna be a good one.
Yeah. There's lots to look forward to here.
We've had a good run of halftime shows too. You got Rihanna. I enjoyed last year's halftime show. The weekend before that.
What was last year? I can't even remember, Kyle.
Last year was Snoop, Eminem.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
that was good.
That's hitting our youth there quite a bit. All right, so we're getting near an hour here. Sean, anything that we haven't hit on that you wanted to talk about, man?
No, I mean, I think we shouldn't leave without mentioning Devin Hester not getting into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, there you go. Did you? I kind of figured it wasn't going to happen this year. How about you?
I mean, I don't know what's changed since last year, so I guess I was also kind of feeling like that was probably going to be the result. I think obviously it's kind of a bummer for Bears fans. Devin Hester is the best ever at his position. I don't know what more you can ask a guy to do.
I think he's going to get in eventually.
I do. I think he will get in eventually.
I think it's one of those where it's a bit of gatekeeping. Honestly, it's because he's a special teamer that they're making him earn it, which is stupid. But I do think that is what we're seeing here. I think he's going to get in eventually.
I think he's going to get in eventually. It's just a matter of time. I don't think, the clamoring around him every year is only going to get louder if he keeps not making it. And I do think that that's eventually going to change.
And Mr. Shorty up, Hester will get screwed with a last ballot Hall of Fame because he was a special teamer. I don't know if it's going to get all the way to the end, but it certainly does feel that is kind of the knock. And I just, I guess I do understand it a little bit, but he's the best to ever do it. Like, there are a few guys that I think deserve. I mean, Cordell or Patterson. When Cordero, retires, I think he's a guy that absolutely should be in the conversation when it comes to the way he impacted the game on special teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I would put him in that same conversation. He's obviously Devin Hester was that on steroids kind of. So I do think it's a matter of time, and there should be more special teams guys in the Hall of Fame. I mean, that's such a big part of the game that that's what's crazy about. And I think I wrote this in the story last night, Kyle, is like, you look at you see a team starting to punt, and half the time you're like, okay, it's time to go use the bathroom or run to the kitchen and grab a snack or whatever. It wasn't like that when Devin Hester was back there. You did not miss his returns.
No, I think of, so obviously the Super Bowl and the game against the Arizona Cardinals, the very famous Dennis Green rant, are two that come to mind for Devin Hester. But There's another game. I don't even remember who it was where he returned. It might have been a kick and a punt. It might have been 2 punts, but I can remember the announcer specifically on the second return going, I don't get it. I think that's what it was. Like he just goes, I don't get it. Like, cause they kicked it to him again and it was the same result. And that is really the, that encapsulate Devin Hester to me, right? Like, it was to the point that you couldn't kick it to him. Like they had returned one. It was like you just had the expectation that he could do it again in the same game. And how many the rules have changed a bit for kick returns, and that is altered it, kick and punt returns. But like, how many kick and punt returns did we see in the NFL just this year? Like,
for touchdowns?
For touchdowns.
Yeah. Oh, not many.
Not many at all. I mean, it's a lost art at this point. And he was the best to do it. And I think he's gonna get there eventually. But all right, let's get out of here, Sean. We're at an hour. We appreciate everyone who jumped on. It was it was great having everyone on this morning. A couple programming notes. We will be back with you guys next Friday morning. I guess I should, John, we're going to be back with them next Friday morning, right? We'll be back next Friday morning. Everyone enjoy the Super Bowl on Sunday. We got a couple of pieces still coming for you this week. Sean, this afternoon, will be dropping a piece with a breakdown of all of the connections for the players and coaches that have a connection to Illinois, whether that's guys that grew up here, that played here at college, played here with the Bears. That'll be a nice, fun piece. And then yesterday, tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, check out shawlocal.com. Sean put together a really cool comparison piece between Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields, going back to, the way they were recruited in high school all the way into, where they are at in their current NFL progression. So that'll be dropping on Saturday. Check that out over the weekend. And with that, once again, we're going to go ahead and get out of here. For Sean Hammond, I am Kyle Nabors. Thank you for joining us. Everyone enjoy the game this weekend, and we will talk to you guys next week.